Hey everyone, I wanted to go over some brand new information that we got from Capcom regarding Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Stories 2, but also some information that is also going to be relevant very near in the future when it comes related to Tokyo Game Show. If you don't necessarily know, Tokyo Game Show is pretty much the Japanese standard for like E3 or even Gamescom, which is something that we just saw in the past couple of weeks. That's more European focused. Tokyo Game Show is very much Japanese and Asian focused. So this is pretty much going to be a rather big event, and Capcom just recently confirmed back on September 1st that they're going to be hosting an event on September 30th at 2 p.m. British time, Standard Time, or 6 a.m. Pacific Time, or 9 a.m. Eastern Time on September 30th. So this is going to be one of those big Capcom presentations, kind of like the ones that we had back at E3, where they're going to showcase a whole heck of a lot of information for a lot of their games. Obviously, this also entails Monster Hunter, be it Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Stories 2. So with all that table setting out of the way, we now can actually get into the good stuff, and this is the fact that we now know pretty much everything that Capcom is going to be showcasing in this very presentation. And just for full clarification, like I talked about in my most recent Rush Palamute video, these are not my sources. This is information that has been provided to us by other sources that I cannot sit here and verify myself. This is something that, we're just providing the information going forward. Hopefully that is going to become true and, it's accurate as best as possible. And essentially what we're looking at here, if you're looking at the video screen and not necessarily just the audio itself, a full timeline of what Capcom is going to be showcasing during their Tokyo Game Show presentation. It obviously speaks about Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil Reverse. These are two of their major projects essentially that they're working with when it comes to that side. They're talking about Ace Attorney's new title, which is something that is a little bit of a surprise. Also, something that's a little bit of a surprise is Pragmata. This is a game that they showcased, I believe, at the very first presentation when the PlayStation 5 was revealed. This is a really interesting Kojima looking game that's appealing, but it's really far off. I believe it's like set to release in 2023, so it's not necessarily something that we should be expecting to release anytime soon. And sandwiched in between all of that is, of course, a couple of Monster Hunter related information. Monster Hunter Rise and, of course, Monster Hunter Stories 2, with a little bit of sprinkled in Monster Hunter Riders as well, which I'll go over at the back end of the video. So essentially when it comes to Monster Hunter Rise, and I'm going to split this into two separate sections. First I'm going to talk about Rise, then we'll talk about Monster Hunter Stories 2. When it comes specifically to Monster Hunter Rise, the very first thing that they mention here directly is that we're going to be seeing the PC trailer reveal for Monster Hunter Rise. Now this is something that I find completely unexpected, only because this event is taking place at the end of September, essentially October if you will. And it's one of those things that I fully expected. This is me personally. I fully expected the PC trailer, or at least the full reveal or something along those lines, of the PC version of Monster Hunter Rise to be showcased a little bit later into the year, most likely along December, around, let's say, the Game Awards presentation or something like that. I fully expected them to actually hold that off until the very end of the year and then go ahead and showcase that is most likely going to release around February or March. Remember that if there is some sort of deal with Nintendo and it's supposed to be remaining a one-year exclusive, it doesn't really matter when they showcase the game. It's still going to be one of those things that it's still not going to be able to be released up until around March or April of 2022. But the fact that they're going to be showcasing it, according to this information, on late September is one of those things that I find a little bit puzzling, and I don't necessarily know what to make of it. But at the end of the day, this does also fuel a lot of the speculation that I've seen on Japanese Twitter, which has been a little bit more critical of the fact that Capcom has been sharing these pretty high definition, high quality visual screenshots, and they keep saying that is like Nintendo Switch footage. And thanks to one of the most recent developer interviews, we now know that's not actually the case. We know that whenever the game is actually rendering a cutscene, it actually shows high render textures from the characters and the armor sets themselves, but only on very specific cutscenes. That's not available when you're actually playing the game itself. This is happening all in real time on the Nintendo Switch. where the screenshots that Capcom is sharing themselves are actually like real-time you fighting monsters, and they're using those high-definition textures, and that's just simply not available on the Nintendo Switch. So a lot of Japanese players are actually saying like, hey, this is most likely the PC version that they're showcasing these screenshots of, but that's not really actually the Nintendo Switch version. So there is a pretty good, obviously, working build already of the PC. If not, there has been one for quite a long time now that they simply keep putting out screenshots for, but we don't necessarily know when the PC version is set to release, much less they've actually been willing to show it themselves. So for this September 30th event, for them to actually showcase the PC version in a trailer seems, to me personally, a little bit early, but at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily surprise me if that is also the case. The second half of this is also backed by the fact that in this information we're seeing, it says that Monster Hunter Rise Capcom Collaboration 5 video will also be showcased. Now this is the pretty much near imminent thing that we've been expecting. I covered it. I made up a video about it separately when we're talking about just the Rush Palamute skin for Mega Man's collaboration onto Monster Hunter Rise. This is pretty much not a surprise anymore. We've actually seen it in action. I do believe now, due to some information that was provided to me afterwards, that is accurate. That information now is fully, I trust it now. When I made the video, I was not necessarily all that gung-ho about it. I was very skeptical, but now after having some conversations, I do think that is completely accurate, and that is the next collaboration we are going to be getting into Monster Hunter Rise with Mega Man and of course the Rush Palamute. But that's not necessarily a surprise. Like I talked about, I just covered it last week. So essentially when it comes to Monster Hunter Rise, we're getting the imminent, almost pretty much drops the very next day, because remember, Tokyo Game Show is on September 30th, and pretty much that following Friday, that would be October 1st, we should be able to see this brand new Mega Man collaboration dropping pretty much that very same day. But when it comes to the Monster Hunter Rise PC trailer, this is something that, again, we should be expecting to drop maybe on March or maybe even April of 2022. So it's one of those things where they're doing that two-punch. The thing that you're getting pretty much right away, and the thing that you should be getting pretty much in the near future or in the long-term future. So I do think that's going to be playing very well to both specific audiences who want something now and later. Now, with all that said, I do think the most juiciest bit of information that we have here is the fact that Monster Hunter Stories 2, according to this information, is getting an expansion #1 announcement trailer, which they're calling a world premiere. And this is, to me, fascinating, because we know now for a fact, and this is something that we've known for a very long time, that Monster Hunter Stories 2 has a whole heck of a lot of monsters that are simply not shown into the game. They're simply just not playable. You can't hunt them, you can't ride them, you can't do anything with them. There's more monsters in the game files of that game than there's monsters available in the game right now. So it was always one of those questions where, like, are they going to keep adding monsters in their roadmap after post-launch in the same way that they've been added pretty much the entirety of the game since it launched? I remember that just this month they dropped 3 new monsters. At the end of this month, we're also going to be able to get 3 more. So it's one of those things, like, they just keep adding monsters into the game, but we already know that they're getting the game file, so that's not necessarily much of a surprise. But there's a lot of monsters that they simply haven't even talked about in the roadmap that we know are in the game files themselves. But now we're looking at a situation that Monster Hunter Stories 2 might potentially be getting an expansion #1. The fact that it's even numbered means that there's going to be most likely an expansion #2 and an expansion #3. And I don't necessarily know what that could actually come to be about. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be like, okay, they're adding brand new, not just areas to explore, but also brand new story content, which would be interesting since that game pretty much ends on a very specific note. Also, at the same time, like, what is the timeline for this? Is this expansion going to be for the end of this year? Is this something that we're looking at for next year? Or, eventually, are they planning to release a second expansion next summer, in the subsequent months? I don't necessarily know, and that's not necessarily clear. But the fact that they're saying that there's going to be an expansion for Monster Hunter Stories 2, and it's not called G-Rank update or anything along those lines, I do even wonder even the monetization aspect of this. Like, is this going to be paid? Is this just going to be free DLC like they keep adding? I don't necessarily know, but I find it fascinating for a game that I don't necessarily think it did all that well. I think it sold like 1 million, 1.5 million units, which is really good for an RPG that's not necessarily the mainline type of games when it comes to Monster Hunter, yet it's still getting all that kind of support. Again, it doesn't necessarily surprise me with the monster list that we do know is in the game files, but I do find it fascinating that they're choosing to do that now and reveal this information as well. Last bit of Monster Hunter information that they provide us with is that Monster Hunter Riders is getting an updated trailer and a couple of promotional things. Also, there's like merchandising for Monster Hunter, which is of course plushies and stuff like that. That's not much of a surprise. Regarding with Monster Hunter Riders, I did see a lot of the comments because I've been doing a lot of the collaboration videos for Monster Hunter Riders, and a lot of people keep telling me that a lot of the single player content that they keep adding as like free DLC or like just stuff that they keep adding, it's actually really good, but it's very grindy. So when it comes to the people who are actually playing that game, they're actually enjoying it, but the fact of the matter is because it's a free mobile game, it is just grindy by nature because of gacha and all of that. So it's very much, you know, tied to that very let's say not very beneficial gamer friendly type of gameplay loop. But when it comes to Monster Hunter, that's pretty much all the information we have that Capcom should be showcasing. A whole heck of a lot of Monster Hunter information, but we don't necessarily know anything else besides this. And once again, I'm going to reiterate, these are not my sources. This is just information that's been provided to me, and I do believe other places as well. So it's one of those things where like I can't sit here and confirm if this is all accurate, but like no different than the Palamute Rush information. The more time that passes, the more people actually begin to support it and say, yeah, this is actually 100% accurate. This is pretty much going to happen. So it's one of those things where like we know what will be shown at Tokyo Game Show. And when it comes to Monster Hunter Rise specifically, I do think the PC trailer is going to be fascinating to see. Just the direct contrast with the Nintendo Switch version, of course, because obviously it's just going to look way better than the Switch version. That's just by nature. But also what the Monster Hunter Stories 2 expansion #1 actually means. But that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you guys found it informational. I know when I read this, I found it fascinating that we actually know what should be coming up in the horizon, and I can't wait to see this presentation on September 30th, once again at 6 a.m. Pacific time or 9 a.m. Eastern time, so do keep that in mind. It is extremely early. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!